Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the Shadow Tech Goddess Part 2, Chapter 7, Magravine. So in our last episode, Paymaster Stenstrom rushes the stricken Gwendolyn, who, as you recall, was brain buzzed by the Lacerta right through the monitor screen and was close to dying. They enter the dark, powerless recesses of the bottom of the ship where the Marians hang out. Lady Alesta reveals herself to be a revered and very potent pilgrim of Marian. She has her companions fetch a bowl and some mystical waters. There are always mystical waters in my stories, are there not? In this case, waters from the pool of Salonmay, which comes from far off Trimble in Zaffin space. They submerge Gwen's head in it, and supposedly this water, which can be breathed in, just like air, so she's not going to drown, will work its magic, and Gwen will be okay. They leave her for several hours, and when she sits up, and though a little dazed and confused, seems no worse for her adventures, which is a big relief. She's all excited about this quest to discover the location of Ing. Gwen has a very scientific mind and soul, very similar to Hannah Ben Sherlamp, and she wants to find out where Ing is, and she wants to take credit for it, just like the professor does. So to make Gwen happy, as she was almost killed, Paymaster Stenstrom reluctantly fetches one of the Vith helmets and is ready to walk the Marian's road to Magravine. And that's where we are this week. This is a longish chapter, I assure you. So buckle up, get a sandwich, get a snack, get whatever you need, because here we go. Part 2, Chapter 7, Magravine. Tara had rigged up a fake set of comm codes, making the Seeker appear as a completely different ship. How did you manage that? Stenstrom asked, fumbling around with the helmet he'd selected. The comm codes are hardwired to the ship. Tara loves shady operations. I got my hands on the brain box to the old frigate Essex before she got put down and smelted, and I installed it in the missives panel. I figured being privateers out for plunder, it might be a good idea to send out fake signals every so often to fool the creeps. I threw some creds around, and I think I slept with somebody too somewhere. Wasn't all that hard if you're not afraid to muck about. So I've got the Essex in there, and the crappy old growler Bellobus too. That's really going low rent. The Bellobus sucked! Who would ever imagine the brains to the Bellobus is actually mounted in a full functional warbird? That should put old HBS off the hunt for a while. Huh? Tara, you never fail to impress. Using the fake headers, he'd sent a call out to his father, Stenstrom the Older, and informed him of Morgan Jeterix's presence aboard the George Parr, and requested she immediately be removed to the safety of the Caroline. His father assured him he'd have her off as soon as possible, and that, so far, everything appeared to be normal aboard the George Parr. Stenstrom picked up the helmet. Now that I'm certain Morgan is safe, let's go to Magravine and do this. He gave one of Tara's Moloch sideburns a quick tug for luck, as was his habit. She slapped him on the rear as he exited. He returned to the Marian's hold and rejoined Alesta. Gwen was sound asleep. He spent a moment with her and then allowed Alesta and Aram to lead him out of the barn and deeper into the hold. Behind the dormitories, they came to a wooden wall. Alesta produced a key and opened the door hidden along the wall's length. They entered a long, empty corridor, once the back end of the cargo hold. Lanterns were suspended from wires high overhead, creating a mock starry pattern. Forced air from the compressors on deck 4 bobbed the lanterns about. Here is the most shielded section of the ship, Alesta said, her voice oddly loud in the quiet of the corridor. Here we may call our road. Stenstrom inspected the surroundings. Are you certain this is permitted, Alesta? You are most welcome here, she said as Aram gathered a small pack. With that, Alesta, arms outstretched and singing, called the road, and it came in good time in a wall of silent fog. The Marian star appeared at the end of the tunnel of fog, yellow, wreathed in a red twisting cloud like an unblinking eye, and the corridor vanished. Seconds seemed like days as they stood there in the fog. The still silence of the corridor was replaced with an equally drafty silence all around. The lantern-lit softness of the hold gave way to the broad sunshine of a hazy afternoon. They took a good look around. Stenstrom, Aram, and Alesta stood on a lonely plain of Magravine in the central Vithland area of Cana. Amazing, Stenstrom thought. In just a moment or two, the three of them had traveled from 9 a.m. of the Tamarack cluster to Cana, a distance of half a light year. What such a mode of transport could do for the fleet, for the League, what possibilities! But no, he had to temper his thoughts. The Marian Star was not to be taken for granted, nor was it to be pressed into service. He was honored to walk their road. Magravine was all alone in an uninhabited portion of central Vithland, east of the Tartan foothills and west of the River Severn pocket. It was a place that invoked a great deal of thought and feeling. To the non-Vith tribes of Cana, like Stenstrom's, it was proof the Vith were a hard people living in a dangerous place. It was a place that stank of deeds done in the past. There wasn't much at Magravine except the occasional herds of mismatched animals migrating away from the area in various directions, thus lending credence to the notion that some sort of elder animal factory existed nearby. The area was quiet. There was no wind, and Stenstrom thought he heard the slow gurgling of the River Severn, lazy in its banks, miles away. Far to the northwest was the distant iron hand of raw mountains Vithland was famous for. Aram and Alesta got their bearings. There, to the northeast, Aram said. Stenstrom turned and spotted a low, grassy rise to the north, obscuring the valley beyond. Beyond the rise, a small finger of mist slowly snaked into the sky like a fluffy cable hanging from the heavens. Aram opened his pack and pulled out Alesta's traveling boots. Leaning against him, she put the hated boots on and buttoned them up. The ground was studded at regular intervals by small stone cairns, mostly overgrown with weeds and grasses. These are old Vith markers, warning the curious of danger, Aram said. To the sisters, this place is about as bad as it gets. Stenstrom produced an odd, multicolored holy stone and held it in his palm. They might be right. Don't move, you two. They both turned to him. What's wrong, Belle? Alesta asked. He examined the ground, low, mostly bare, and with tumbled stones and orderly Vith cairns. Lots of places to hide booby traps. I've been working on this chromatic holy stone. It's supposed to warn me of danger. What sort of danger? Aram asked. Well, that's the whole thing. I'm not for sure. It's trembling right now, which tells me that danger is nearby. I don't know what the nature of the danger is. The George Parr had about a day to loiter over this area and do what they wished. There could be traps about, as you treated on in the mess, and there's always the Lacerda to consider. She could be skulking about. Alesta, I would like you and Aram to return to the ship. Please, I need to do this alone. I have my Tregador here, and will contact you when I'm ready. You never wear your Tregador, Belle, Aram said, skeptical. I have it this time. Show it to me. Stenstrom pulled his sleeve back, and there was a fancy silver gauntlet with a fine agate encrusted in the center around his wrist. See? It's here. I've got 5 stones within, so it should be completely untraceable. I'll contact you when I'm done. Alesta looked worried. You're probably right, Belle, but I hate leaving you here alone. In the first few moments after you put the helmet on, you might feel overwhelmed and seriously believe that you are going mad. Just write it out, all right? Be careful, Belle, Aram said. I'll do my best. Alesta reached into her pack. Oh, Belle, take this. She pulled out a small bag, pulled tight with a string. Stenstrom took the bag and opened it. Inside were a number of turquoise stones, shaped roughly like teardrops. They rattled in his hand like polished stones. What are these? Holy stones, Alesta replied. We're told that they're an effective countermeasure against Los Capricos weapons, should you encounter any. Stenstrom closed the bag. Thank you very much. I won't ask where you got them. As Alesta watched, he made the bag disappear with a wave of his hand. She got up on her tiptoes and gave him a kiss on the cheek. How I adore you, Belle. Such a good friend, in all places. I know you'll be fine. Yes, you'll be fine. With that, she removed her boots and replaced them in the pack. Aram came up and shook Stenstrom's hand. "Safe shores, Belle. We'll be waiting to bring you back home." Soon a wall of fog rose around them, and when it disappeared, a minute later, the two of them were gone. "We're back on the ship, Belle," came Aram's thoughts over the Tregador. "Well, that was fast, though I shouldn't be surprised. How's Gwen?" "We're on our way there now. Keep me informed, please." Though they were about a light year away and getting farther all the time, the power of the Tregador kept them always within reach. A technological sensation created by the departed House of Want. The interlinked power stones within the agate allowed his Tregador to be connected covertly to Aram's, Gwen's, and Tara's matching ones, regardless of distance. Tregadors were fairly new aboard fleet vessels, only recently having been approved for use by the Sisterhood of Light. After decades of careful testing, replacing the old, unsteady J rasters, he didn't presume to remotely understand how they worked. All right, now to it. He navigated up the rise, testing each step, wondering if some clever booby trap was about to be sprung at any moment. He'd come to respect Hannah Ben Sherlamp enough not to put anything past her. Though he was apparently alone on the step, he faded into the shadows and took flight, the tails of the HRN spreading out around him as he TK'd himself into the air, the Elder helmet tucked under his arm. Gliding silent, he crested the small hill. Stretching off into the distance in the valley below him was a great crack in the ground, at least a mile long and about a quarter mile at its widest. The grasses covering the steps all around abruptly stopped near the crack, giving way to bare, hardened earth dotted with orderly Vith cairns arranged in a polka dot pattern radiating away. The warm afternoon air came to grips with the markedly colder vapor issuing out of the chasm, creating the ever-present feather of cloud rising up. He had to steady himself as the updraft from the chasm spun the air a bit. Magravine had a distinctly vaginal look to it, long and straight, a geographic nod to the evil woman who once lived there. Once, a great Vith temple stood in the valley, spired and ornate, reaching into the sky, the stronghold of the Grand Abbess of Magravine. Then, there was Shadow Tech and madness. Then there was the Black Abbess and all those dead at her hands. Then there were the armies, the Vith, the sisters arrayed against her. Now there was nothing but a scar on the landscape that time had yet to heal. He circled. Something was waiting for him down there. His trembling chromatic holy stone was proof of that. At least Alesta and Aram were safe far away on the ship. One less thing to worry about. Descending to near ground level, he surveyed the situation. Apparently, there was nothing more beneath him than hardened earth. He produced a black holy stone and rolled it along the ground toward the perimeter of the chasm. Something moved. He thought he caught a glint of light. He veered away. A searing red beam blasted the holy stone to nothingness. He hoisted his mega eye and had a look. Moving with tiny, ant-like precision were numerous muted pendants in the shape of eyeballs, hanging from a wire that was slung about the chasm in a spiderweb fashion. They moved mechanically, sliding smoothly in one direction until they bumped into each other, and then reversed course and slid back in the other way. The wire was tightly strung across the open face of the chasm, the eyeball charms moving slowly back and forth. There were other types of charms as well. Ears, noses, cannons, odd six-legged shapes, horned and tusked. He recoiled with hidden memory. He'd encountered something like this before, possibly at Clovis and at Caroline. The wire that had restrained Melazar as she slowly roasted. He'd seen it there. And here it was again. Aram, he thought into the Tregador. "I'm right here, Belle," came the quick reply. "I'm encountering an odd weapon here at the chasm. A taut length of wire, studded with moving charms and pendants. What can you tell me about it?" "Hold on, let me get to a terminal." "Don't use FleetNet. Our query could be observed. Use the shipboard archives." There was a pause. Okay, 1 sec. "Guess who's sitting here with me, Belle?" He smiled. "Hi, Gwen." Gwen's thoughts drifted into the Tregador. "Hey, Belle. You should be resting." "I'm fine. How can I rest with you so far away? I want to help. Now, what are we looking up? He brought her up to date. There was a pause, then Gwen spoke. All right, the wire is a Los Capricos weapon called the Angry Miser, registered to the House of Sorensen. They took it with them when they went to the Zaffins in 00000AX. The Sorensens were noted businessmen and practitioners of Geller magic. They used the Angry Miser to guard their cache of wealth. Though the Sorensens were officially Xenons at the time of their departure from the League, they were actually transplanted Remnaths, and, thanks Gwen, we'll discuss their tribal status later. So what can this thing do? There was another short pause. It's a length of wire studded with a variety of charms and other animated trinkets. I see that. Go on. The charms do different things. There are the ones in the shape of a roving eyeball. Those maintain a powerful vigilance. They move about the wire, detecting anything that might come near. There are ear charms that can hear you, and nose charms that can smell you too. Once a victim is determined, they can target it with any number of energy, gas, or projectile weaponry that look like cannons. That's probably what blew me into oblivion at Clovis. And that's not all. There are the sympathetic charms, those in the shape of animals and other monstrous creatures. If you trigger them, they'll drop off the wire and come to life, growing to full size and attacking. There are mouth charms also that can utter curses and cast spells. What if I cut the wire? Then they'll all drop off and you'll be stuck fighting the lot. And then there's the guardian charms that are cast in the likeness of certain individuals. Remember how the Lacerda and Rodrigo of Bergen appeared from the pillar of smoke at Caroline? It was a guardian charm in their image that summoned them. With such charms, the Lacerda doesn't actually have to be there. She shall be summoned when needed. Wonderful. How convenient. And another thing, the Lacerda was carrying an odd handbag at Caroline. I looked it up. The handbag is known as a Galvatar. With it, she can pull out any other Los Capricos weapon. Obviously, she's all the more dangerous. I'm fairly certain that my shadow movement defeats the notice of the seeing eye charms. They don't seem to detect me. You've promised to teach me how to do that, Belle, Gren replied. Indeed I have, and the moment we're married, I'll begin teaching you. Gwen laughed slightly. I cannot wait. About that, I was preparing a letter to send home to my family and Prentice announcing our intention to be wed. As per Xenon tradition, they're going to want to interview you at length and give their formal consent. Will you mind such a thing? I'm sure I'll do fine. Aram's thoughts barged in. This is heartwarming stuff here, Belle, but let's focus on the task at hand, please. Stenstrom surveyed the landscape. I think I see an uncovered spot at the northern end of the chasm. I'm going to sneak past the miser at that point and make my way down. He veered to the north and dropped close to the ground. Gwen came back on. Belle, the chasm at Magravine is, at its deepest, 1,250 feet. It's been pretty well surveyed over the years, and is perfectly safe, though folklore and superstition keeps most people away. It's not exactly a tourist destination. Various scholarly expeditions at the site have installed level ramps and handrails all the way down. Do you see them? He looked around. Sure enough, at various points, ramps were dug into the side of the chasm with handrails, all level and safe for the unathletic scholars to perform their work. I do, but the railing is entwined by Angry Miser, a very convenient place to anchor it. He approached the ramp. Numerous winds of wire were strung at intervals with dangling eyeball-shaped charms, noses and ears, hanging here and there, industriously going about their patrols. The mouth charms occasionally spoke in a dire voice.
You there? You there?
He carefully dropped down between the runs of wire and went to the chasm. The air became cold. The afternoon light quickly swallowed up in darkness. He drew a yellow holy stone and shook it, creating a warm orange glow. The stone around him was black and shiny, a remnant of the fiery attack that took place here centuries ago. Glancing at the stone as he went down, he thought he could occasionally see indications of the foundation and sublevels that the temple of Magravine once rested on, home of the Grand Abbess of Magravine, the Black Abbess. The old Vith heroes had come to this place and extracted revenge on Magravine for her forbidden and sadistic experiments with shadow tech. The horrors this place had once seen were silent in black shiny stone. "How you doing, Belle?" "I'm about halfway down, Gwen. I really don't want to put this thing on." "I know you don't. I wish I could come down there to be with you, to offer comfort. I love you so." Hearing those words, something she didn't often say, gave him comfort. He wished she was here with him. The ramp ended, and he still wasn't to the bottom. There was about 50 feet to go, murky and unsteady. His HRN spread out around him like a pair of dark green wings as he drifted down. He touched bottom. "I'm at the bottom, Gwen," he thought into the wrist-bound Tregador. "The footing is terrible, no flat surfaces at all, no real place to stand." He looked up. Far above, he caught a few small glimpses of light here and there, but not much. His holy stone held aloft threw the place into craggy relief. He sighed and put the ancient stone helmet on before he could stop himself. A nightmare of fantastical images hit him cold. He staggered. Odd planets spanned the sky in a blur, and graveyard hands reached out from hidden places. There was no sky, just a gallery of the abstract spanning off into the paneled distance. He saw colors that couldn't exist, and intersections of time and space that were not logical. He was bewildered. He was unprepared. He fell to his knees. He saw transcendent layers of reality. He saw himself remade over and over. He saw doorways opening and closing with horrid figures standing behind them. Just an arm's length away was a whole universe of black, a dead universe. There was a single person at the center of it, a lost, forlorn person. The Shadow Tech goddess. He saw a sandy tornado growing until it engulfed all. He saw a great tree stretching out into infinity. He saw hands reaching for him from across time. Stenstrom pawed at the helmet. Mad. He was going mad and quickly. He saw flashes of Gwen's face with its tiny scar, and Tara's face with its usual sideburns. He saw Morgan in his room, and he was making love to her hard, their bodies twisted together. And there was Tara, giant size, massively endowed Tara with him at Belmont Manor, and they were, with Tara. He looked into a mirror and saw himself as a woman. And then there he was again in a mask, shunned and laughed at, prowling the rooftops of Tyrol. Somebody bounded at his side, someone in black, small and quick. Everything was a funnel pouring in unwanted information, and he was choking. Alesta's face. "Write it out, Belle. You're such a dear friend. Dear friend." And he saw Alesta as a used-up harlot trawling the streets for dimes, coughing, withering away, lost in a pool. Gwen's face. "I love you." Animals. Morgan's face. "I love you too. What chance did I have? There are many of you."
"Only one of me. Explode in me. You know you want it."
Hatches and reaching hands.
"You can't get away."
Animals standing over him, nuzzling his face through the visor. Forgotten colors and islands in the sky. A warm, moist tongue licking his face. He was lying on a metal floor, flat and precision machined. "You're falling through space." No, you're at the bottom of the chasm of Magravine, wearing an elder helmet. No, look, you're lying on a flat metal floor." Things began to sort themselves out. He was lying on a metal floor, covered with ages of animal droppings in various degrees of freshness. Hoof prints were imprinted in the feces. There was some sort of horned goat with a tufted white beard standing over him, browsing on the collar of his HRN, having no luck chewing off a piece. Looked sort of familiar. Goats. Where had he seen goats like this before? Oh, and the mountains near Castle Blanchford. What were they called? Quit trying to eat my coat. Get away. He sat up and the goat skipped down the hall, adding its hoof prints into the layer of feces. Ibex. That's what they were called. The goat was an ibex, a hardy mountain goat found in the north. A whole herd of ibexes rumbled down the corridor, their hooves creating the thunder of noise. He could smell their wild gaminess as they passed around him. Where was he? Holding the helmet steady with his right hand, he took a hard look around. He was in a long corridor that rose up in a towering series of metal stacks or chimneys. The corridor he stood in was about 100 feet wide and an undetermined length long. It was flanked with a dizzying array of glass and metal carousels that spun in unison, each joined to the others all around like an assemblage of cogs, working in ageless precision. There were 10 levels of carousels, with the smallest being situated at the top, getting progressively larger through the lower levels to 3 times the size of a man at the bottom, like an inverse series of church bells. Through the glass, the carousels were filled with some sort of dark blue fluid. Floating forms of what looked like spotted taliops, a kind of medium-sized wild cat common in the Ester marshes, drifted around in the fluid like laundry in a washer. The taliops spun in the carousels, asleep. So here, in a crack in the ground, completely undetectable, was a grand animalium, as Aram had called it, built by the elders, covered in dung, and functioning perfectly all these centuries, spitting out random animals and sending them on their way. He fought off the urge to explore. He had to remember what he was here to find. The stellar route to Ing. Where could it be? Could be anywhere. He thought he heard someone walking up behind him. Soft footsteps clicking on the metal, moving at a quick walking cadence. He turned. A woman approached, wearing a white sister's robe, missing the headdress. She had long black hair and a stunning face. Who was this? She carried a heavy armload of papers, scrolls, parchment, and a little tabletop telescope. She had her nose buried in a loose collection of parchments. She walked up to him and gave a surprised start. "Your pardon," she said in a preoccupied voice as she moved past him. Stenstrom was incredulous. Who was this woman? A sister, clearly, but... Sister, wait. The woman stopped and turned her head a little. "I am in a hurry. What are you doing at the bottom of Magravine Chasm?" "Chasm? This is my home," she said, continuing on. "It is a little remote, but I'd hardly call it a chasm." Her home. He lifted the helmet and peeked under. He felt his brain recoil a little. The grand animalium disappeared, as did the woman. He was back in the unsteady, uneven bottom of the darkened chasm. He stumbled and fell down a few feet, wedging his foot. He dropped the helmet back down. A fist of color and a film of disjointed images passed before his eyes, and he was back in the grand animalium. He moved down the corridor, following the woman. "Great sister?" Again she turned. "What may I help you with, sir?" she said in a hurried but reasonable voice. "It's not often I have visitors here." "Are you the Grand Abbess of Magravine?" "Who else would I be?" "You're also the Black Abbess." She stopped and puzzled. "I don't know that name. Who is the Black Abbess?" "You are. You're the Black Abbess." "Again, I don't know that name. Not a very flattering one by the sound of it." "Is that what they're calling me in Valenhelm now? I never wear black." She glanced at the stack of papers she carried. "I confess to being in a bit of rush. Perhaps you might care for a spot of lunch as I attend to my duties. As I said, I don't have visitors very often. Stay, please. Once concluded, I shall join you." She turned and began walking away. "Great Abbess, I'm looking for Ing." She stopped, her curiosity tweaked. "Ing? Why are you here looking for Ing? It's not an overly pleasant place. Very low troposphere, very cold, and a little dark as well. I've been there several times myself. A tiresome, ghastly trip. I can't say I recommend it. I lost something there. I must recover it. A family heirloom, perhaps? Many people left things behind on Ing. Quite a shame, really." She produced some sort of timekeeping device and consulted it. Well, I'm heading in that direction. Walk with me and I'll show you. I've recorded Ing's location. He came to her side, Stenstrom's 6'7" height towering over her. She adjusted the stack of items she carried and held them out, expecting him to carry them for her. He reached out and took them. What she handed him didn't have weight, per se, but it had substance of some sort. That done, she continued walking, Stenstrom at her side. "Please keep up, sir." Stenstrom quickened his pace. This certainly wasn't at all what he had expected. The Grand Abbess of Magravine, the enemy, the inflictor of pain, the Black Abbess. And here she was, a perfectly reasonable and enchanting woman. But what was she? A projection? A transaction of thought locked in time? That must be it. She had to be an afterimage from ages past, probably before she became the Black Abbess. A ghost stuck in a nether reality, replaying past events, able to interact to some extent. "Great Abbess?" he asked. "Yes. You mentioned you seldom have visitors. Why is that?" "I don't know, really. I suppose it's because the others are afraid of me and what I know." "The others?" "The Grand Abbesses. I think in ways they often don't find palatable. I explore topics they're too afraid to. And I suppose I have a rather obsessive nature. My sister, Subra, is also obsessive, but people love her. Everyone loves Subra and leaves Magravine to her books." She looked up at him and smiled. "But you're here today, and I welcome your company." He listened to her words, possibly spoken ages ago. He wondered about something. "Have you ever heard of shadow tech?" "No. Should I?" She sounded intrigued. "I'm not often asked a question I don't know the answer to." "What is shadow tech?" "Nothing. My mistake." "You're lying, sir. I know when lies are told and when they are not. Yet another reason why they're afraid of me." They walked a little bit further. She stopped and pointed. "The location of Ing carved here in perpetuity. It's no great secret. However, the information might become lost to the ages with the passage of time, as with Chimera and Emira before. I intend to preserve the knowledge. There's nothing more tragic than something that is plainly known falling into oblivion, so I've cast it in stone." "I agree, Great Abbess, and thank you." She held out her hands, and Stenstrom gave her papers back. "Do not forget, lunch shall be served in an hour. May I count on you dining with me? I do confess to sometimes being a bit lonely." "Of course. I truly wish to have lunch with you." She looked at his face and gave a smile. "And I have been remiss. What is your name, sir?" "I am Stenstrom, Lord of Belmont, South Tyrol." Magravine looked puzzled. "I don't know that name. You are full of information I don't know. I would be keen to learn more about your home and about this shadow tech you mentioned. Sounds worthy of research. The dead girls, the dead bodies, the torment, the Black Abbess, the Vith coming in force, the smoking hole in the ground they left behind, the black hats." He studied her, and for a moment her image changed. She became a hunched, terrifying figure, eyes glazed in utter evil, skin blackened, hands clenched and ready to mangle. Just for a second she appeared that way, and then she was back as she was. "Oost is on the menu for today," she said, continuing down the corridor. "I hope you fancy it." "Sounds good," he said. He watched her walk away, and for a moment he grieved. She was such a lovely person, and what had happened? Discovery, obsession, madness, loneliness, agony. If only she would have remained as she was, how things might have been different. The chasm of Magravine might never have been. If only. He turned to the area where she pointed. He saw nothing but the Elder Tech carousel slowly spinning. He concentrated and rummaged around with the helmet's sight, passing through layers of time and reality. A carved mural appeared before him, laid out as a celestial chart of bewildering complexity. "Gwen," he thought through the Tregador. No response. He produced a pen and folded ream of vellum with a wave of his hand and carefully copied what he was looking at, double and triple checking everything to ensure he got every detail right. He left nothing to chance. He copied everything, the symbols, the figures, even cracks and imperfections in the stone. No, they weren't right. Copying by hand was too imprecise. The chart relied on angles and lines of intersection, and any tiny deviation would put one off millions of stellar miles in the wrong direction. After several failed attempts, he decided to create a rubbing. He tacked up a sheet of fresh vellum, and using a piece of graphite he made holy stones with, created a detailed rubbing, the lines and features of the chart coming out nicely. When satisfied, he put his materials away, placed the rubbing in the center of the ream to protect it, and then turned to leave. He was excited, his heart pounding. He'd done it. Here, before him, was the location of long-lost Ing. Gwen must be rubbing off on him. The moment of discovery was intoxicating. Oh, what stories he'd have to tell Gwen and the rest. Would they believe that the Black Abbess was once a charming lady? Probably not. He TK'd himself up past the magnificent carousels made by the elders and up into the heights. The view through the helmet began to flicker as, in his excitement, he wasn't controlling it as well as before. Lines of force passed in front of him. Ages passed. As he flew up, he heard a ghastly cackling coming from below. It was the ugliest laugh he had ever heard.
Where are you going?
He heard a diabolical baritone voice cry out,
You've only just arrived, and I wish to show you wondrous things.
He thought he saw something in black and veiled, flying up from the depths after him, reaching and laughing, twisted and demented.
Let me show you.
The raw evil that radiated from the figure was overwhelming. Quickly, he pulled the helmet off, and the shiny black sides of the chasm returned, the laughing gone, though it echoed through his thoughts. He crashed through the ruins of Angry Miser wire, scattering the animated charms into the depths. The eyeball charms, fully alerted, didn't go down without a fight. Cannons turned in his directions. Hot beams of energy, buckshot, explosive gases erupted in a fiery wall. Stenstrom fell to the hard earth near the lip of the chasm. He pushed the helmet away from him, uncertain of where he was in space and time for a moment. The rushing sound of claws scrabbling up the sides of the chasm brought him back. 5 stoutbacks, large, 6-legged reptilian creatures from Onaris, clambered over the side. They were the Onaris version of an ox, coming from the fierce mountains in the central continent, emerald green, tireless and strong, able to cling to near vertical surfaces with ease. If Lieutenant Kylos was to be believed, as mean as a snake and packing a dirty bite that could put one into a bout of blood poisoning with the slightest nip. Many of Kai's brothers, sisters, and cousins were missing select body parts due to careless encounters with the bad-tempered stoutback. They tested the air with their flicking tongues and shambled off in various directions, most paying no attention to him. One, however, loped in his direction, head lowered, tongue darting out of its mouth. Its cow-like size and apparent power came clear as it closed the distance. Stenstrom took the helmet and tried to TK into the air. He couldn't concentrate, his mind still addled from the ordeal of the helmet. He remained rooted to the ground. The stoutback opened its maw, dripping with sticky saliva, and attacked. Stenstrom raised his left arm to protect himself, and the great lizard chomped down on his forearm with crushing force. His HRN held. The dagger-like teeth failed to penetrate. The creature thrashed about, trying to knock Stenstrom down, where it could then rend him open with its claws. The sisters were with him. He had their power. He stood his ground. Stenstrom supposed he could kill it easily enough with his Ents, but he found he had a kind heart for beasts, no matter how huge or terrible, and he'd rather not kill if he could avoid it. He shook his hand. The bag Alesta had given him appeared from nowhere. He managed to reach in, draw a stone, and then cast it at the stoutback, hitting it in its haunches. There was a flash, and the great beast vanished, the others looking on impassively in the distance. The sleeve of his HRN was a mess with lizard slobber, but as always it resisted and was undamaged. Lying on the ground was a shiny pewter charm in the shape of a 6-legged stoutback. The The turquoise holy stone Alesta had given him worked. He picked the charm up and placed it into the depths of his HRN. Gwen, are you there? Right here, Belle. What happened to you? We were getting worried. I got cut off when I put the helmet on. I have the data. Don't ask me to describe what it was like, because I'm not up to it right now. I'll tell you later. I crashed through the Angry Miser, and now there are stoutbacks from Onaris running around all over. I got attacked by one. Are you alright? I'm fine. My HRN will probably need a cleaning. I got rid of it with one of the holy stones Alesta gave me. Those must have come from the sympathetic charms. According to our research, they won't last forever. Give them 10 or 15 minutes and they'll return to where they came from. I'm going to clear out of here. I'll head southeast towards the River 7. If Aram and Alesta could come and get me, that would be great. Aram's thoughts came on. No problem, Belle. We're on our way. Stenstrom gained some height and drifted away, moving east. He had a great deal of visibility and could see the distant river moving slowly in its banks. Before long, he saw the familiar whirling column of white fog appear to the east, and then fade just as quickly. There was Aram and Alesta. He hurried down to join them. Took you too long enough, he jokingly said as he emerged from the shadows. Aram and Alesta were in distress. The Lacerda was there, standing skinny in her black lace gown and her lenses, smoking her usual cigarette, and she had them both by the arm. "Well, hi, buddy boy," she said in her childlike voice. "Did you miss me? Huh? Huh?" "You," Stenstrom spat as he drew his ents. "Have you been hiding here this entire time, you miserable git?" "Yep. We figured you'd show sooner or later, and you didn't disappoint, did ya?" "I owe you a killing, Lacerda, for what you did to Gwendolyn." "Ah, how's your lady? I buzzed her pretty fucking good, didn't I? Right through the fucking terminal and all." She tightened her grip, and Aram whimpered a bit. "So first things first. Did you get the data you were looking for? Did you, Joey boy? Huh?" "My employer wants to know." "I found nothing." "Ah, well that's too bad. I guess I have to kill these two fuckers, and for nothing then." "Harm my friends and you die seconds later." The Lacerda's eyes flashed with delight. She was enjoying the standoff. "Oh, I'm supposed to play you this message. Let's see." She tossed Aram aside like a rag doll, and he flew through the air a considerable distance before landing hard. "Remy!" Alesta cried. "Shut up, you scrawny little bitch." She fished around in her handbag and got out a small hollow disc. She tossed it to the ground. The disc came to life, and the holographic image of Hannah Ben Sherlamp, seated behind her Dragon Ball desk, appeared in withering color.
"Paymaster Stenstrom, well met again."
"Are you not tired of these games, Professor? Haven't you anything better to occupy your time?"
"Absolutely not, Paymaster. Rest assured, you have my full attention. It needn't have come to this. I was willing to pay, handsomely so, for the information. Now, unfortunately, look where we are."
"You're going to allow your paid dog to harm my friends over a bit of meaningless information?"
"Yes, I am, and I'm certain you're aware it is not meaningless by this point. I believe your Countess-in-Waiting understands. Pity. So, allow me to ask, and please note, the lives of your friends depend on the answer. Did you locate the information? Did you locate Eng?"
Stenstrom paused. The Lacerda tightened her grip a bit. Alesta grimaced. "Of course I did." Hannah Ben Sherlamp's brown eyes flared in anticipation.
"I see. Well done. Well done indeed. You have accomplished something not done in thousands of years. Unfortunately, none but those present will ever know that. You will give it to my associate, or both your friends shall die."
Stenstrom shook his hand and produced the roll of vellum. "You mean this?" he asked. "Is this what you want?" Professor Sherlamp stood up.
"Give it to my associate now, and she will verify the contents. Then your friends may go free, and they best watch their tongues in the days ahead, for they shall be watched.
He took a step forward and held out the roll of paper. The Lacerda let go of Alesta and TK'd both her and Aram into the air. She reached out and took the paper, allowing her finger to gently run down Stenstrom's. They stood nose to nose. "I am aching to kill you," Stenstrom whispered. "Yeah? Well, here I am, Joe boy. Kill me. Kill me up fine." She closed her eyes and took a deep breath through her nose. "You know something? You smell good, fella." She then TK'd Stenstrom into the air as well. He felt the crushing vise of it constrict around him. Hannah Ben Sherlamp spoke again.
Unfortunately, we are at a place where I can't allow any of you to live. People might talk. And remember, you've only yourself to blame for this.
She turned to the Lacerda.
"Open the scroll and show it to me, please."
The woman in black stared at Stenstrom, breathing in his scent deeply. She seemed captivated by his smell.
"Lacerta!"
Sherlamp yelled. "Huh?"
"The documents! Show them to me!"
She shook her head and gave Stenstrom a last wink. She opened the roll of paper and showed it to the hologram, the professor's eyes livid with the moment.
"Yes! Yes! I see!"
she cried. A pewter charm nestled within the ream fell to the ground. A gigantic stoutback appeared, roaring and tongue flicking. It bit down on the Lacerda's wrist, slicing through her black wrappings and drawing blood. Stenstrom heard her bones crunch under the force. She screamed in agony and released the three of them from her TK. Aram and Alesta staggered away as the stoutback, in a full killing frenzy, clawed the Lacerda's lacy gown to shreds.
"For the love of creation, Lacerta, control this situation immediately!"
The holographic Hannah Ben Sherlamp demanded. Stenstrom stomped on the disc, destroying it. The Lacerda wrenched herself free from the stoutback. Stenstrom slammed the stone helmet onto her head. Her gaunt, pale face shone through the visor, and as had happened to him, she was overwhelmed by the ferocity of what she saw. Her eyes went round. She screamed. Stenstrom hauled back and haymakered her square in the face, shattering the stone helmet into innumerable bits. She fell, and the stoutback had her again. Stenstrom snatched up the vellum and several of the larger bits of the helmet, took Aram and Alesta into light TK, and bore them away. His last glance at the Lacerda, the stoutback had her by the head, thrashing back and forth, her body shaking about like a doll. And with that, woo! We come to the conclusion of Part 2, Chapter 7, Magravine. That's a haul. That was a long chapter, wasn't it? Stenstrom gets down there, finds that the George Parr had rigged the opening to the chasm of Magravine with the angry miser, makes his way down there, puts on the helmet, and he sees, after quite a cacophony of sounds and images, the animalium at the bottom. And there's, weird animals that are being grown basically down there in an automatic fashion. The system is automated, and then once they're done, they basically just walk out and go wherever they want. He sees a projection of the Grand Abbess of Magravine, an ancient projection of her before she became obsessed with shadow tech and became the Black Abbess, and was saddened to see that she was a perfectly decent person before the madness, before the shadow tech. She became one of the most horrid villains in Kana's history. And when I first started the League of Elder series, she was, the main bad. He was kind of like the devil, basically. But I kind of lost interest in the character, and you never really see her too much in the later stories. Kind of forget about her. But in this instance, I wanted to explore her a little bit and show that she didn't start off as a maniacal creature, and that she even says, I tend to be a bit obsessive. And boy, did she ever get obsessive. And it was her quest to discover and develop shadow tech that really pushed her over the edge. Maybe to some small degree what happened wasn't necessarily her fault, or things fell out of her control. She mentioned Subra of the Mark as her sister, and Subra and Magravine and Terfall and her other brothers and sisters. Lacerda the Midnight is one of her sisters. They are a mythical, and I guess based in reality, family of Vith from Hama of Telmus Falls, who was a Vith hero. Hama's wife was a giant, about 30 feet tall. It was suspected that she was actually a High-Tath warrior in disguise, but her name was Amira of the Sword. Amira bore several children. Subra of the Mark, who was the first Shadow Tech female, was one, and she's a big fixture in Vith mythology. Many Vith households were founded by Subra of the Mark. And then she has several brothers and other sisters, Magravine being one, and Lacerda the Midnight being the other. And Magravine was always a bit jealous of her sister because she was so pretty and so beloved by the people, while Magravine was more studious and, book-bound and less personable. Not a bad person, but she wasn't the charismatic force that her sister was. And maybe that's one of the reasons why she became obsessed with Shadow Tech, because her sister was a Shadow Tech female, the very first in recorded history. Hama was one of the sisters' Itmen. Stenstrom is an Itman, but he is the product of a refined system where the sisters lend him their power at a measured rate. Hama got it all from the sisters, and he went nuts, and he eventually devoured his wife Amira and all of his children except for Magravine. And then, sort of like Kronos, he eventually got cut open and out came his children. They were all perfectly fine. How does that work? I don't know. That was just part of Vith mythology. Hama of Telmus Falls is a big one. I need to do a video on him just to describe him, because a lot of Vith culture and heritage and mythology comes from Hama of Telmus Falls. Some of it exaggerated, some of it true. Eventually exits with the location to Ing. He gets waylaid by the Lacerda, and the Lacerda is sniffing him up and down. Now, what's going on with that is the sisters have a very pronounced sense of smell. So the sisters' senses are very acute, except for their eyesight, which is very poor. Their sense of smell is particularly potent. There's a topic that comes up with the sisters called programmability, which is basically where the sisters go around and get impregnated by various men around the league. It's called their program, and it's supposed to be a big honor when the sisters come to get serviced by you. And the more you participate in the program, the higher your programmability and the higher your social status. Paymaster Stenstrom has since he's an Itman, he has a very special programmability. It's called the Pell. It's kind of a legendary programmability status. It's basically, he emits a pheromone that the sisters just can't resist. They just love it. It's supposed to drive them into a frenzy, just smelling it. And Lacerda is starting to exhibit that. She's just sniffing them like, man, dude, you smell good. Whoa. And being a complete hedonist, the Lacerda is gonna do what her natural inclinations are to do regardless. So she's starting to get the picture that this guy could be very useful to her in certain after hours pursuits, since apparently she's debauched in the extreme, goes through sex robots like they're not even there because she's a sister and has incredible power. Like, he's this it guy. He smells awesome. I could probably do him up and he wouldn't break like a sex robot. I should enslave him in this little dungeon that she captured back on some planet. We'll get into this later, but it gets pretty creepy. It gets pretty X-rated, but we'll see. Anywho, next chapter, part 2, chapter 8, Point of Light. So we'll see what is done with the information that they just recovered on the location of Ing. And we'll see if the Lacerda survives her deadly encounter with the Stoutback. That was a pretty compromised position she was in when we exited. Anywho, I want to thank once again my good friend Cass Peace for doing Professor Sherlam's lines. Good going, Cass. You really do sound threatening Cass is a beautiful human being, an absolute sweetheart of a person, but wow, I guess when she wants, Cass can sound pretty scary. So excellent work, Cass. Greatly appreciated. Carry on. And in the meantime, this is Ren Presents. I am your host, Ren. Peace out.